to order the January 27th meeting of the Rutherford County Health and Education Committee. Our first item is approval of minutes, and I'll call on Brad Turner.
Madam Chair, I've had a chance to review the minutes from last month. I found them in order and make a motion for their approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, community care report. Ms. Cook.
Got a good report. Everything is stable, doing well. So
Census
no complaints from our complaint department.
Census was 126 as of
Yeah.
this report.
And we collected, where did I see that? Well, yeah. Mr. King reported that we had just under, what's it, $947,995 collection last month,
In December.
December.
All right, we have a motion to approve the report.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? All right, Ms. Garrett, Health Department. We've got two reports, November and December.
Good evening. Okay, so I brought November since we didn't get to meet in December, just to give you a little update. We have, our numbers are right where we expect they would be. We've got quite a few primary prevention initiatives that have started. Remember, those are the things where we're trying to reach people before they get disease processes and prevent the entry into healthcare by being healthier. And we've got all kinds of things, like we're starting a new junior chef with several of the county schools, where we teach the kids how to use vegetables in their meals and taste new vegetables that they've never tried before, and really get them involved in cooking. And when they graduate the program, they get a little chef hat. And it's really good. So we've had a lot of good reports from where the kids say, "Oh, I got my mom to try this," or "We now fix this," you know. So it's exciting. We've been doing free flu shots since January. Early part of January, they lifted the fee, the state did. So flu shots are still important, still needed. If you haven't had it yet this year, it's still recommended, and they're free now. And we're trying to get out and do some community events. We've done a couple of ball games and things like that to make sure and offer it, let people know. So, and that's at both our sites, of course. Walk in, no appointment needed. We started another new primary prevention initiative with this is kind of an interesting state program called the Gold Sneaker. And this is something that daycares can apply for. And they will, if they promise to do certain activities with kids, keep them active, if they offer healthy snacks and they have a smoke-free campus, then they can earn this Gold Sneaker award. And then they can advertise and that. So this is a new initiative because a lot of daycares don't know about it in Rutherford County. So our initiative is to educate them, tell them how to do it, and get them on board with this program. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this as it goes along. We're just starting that one. Water safety, because before we know it, I know it doesn't feel like it tonight, but it will be swimming and lake and pool time. So we started some new things this year. We inspect all public pools, as you know, every month when they're open. So our inspectors will be taking out pool safety tips and reminders as kind of a preventative thing there as well, partnering with other people to get that information out there. So those are just some of our new initiatives that we kind of got started in November, heading into the new year. Can we do them together?
Yeah,
okay. And then December, this is our year wrap up, and we really did amazingly. Our encounters, that's the patient numbers that come through the door, stayed very much the same. If you look at them number to number, it would be a little bit lower, but we remember we had that 4-month period with no nurse practitioner, and then we had another 6-month period with no nurse practitioner, and then the dentist started, so the dental numbers. So all of it, if you compare it with the amount of staff we have, we're ahead of the game from last year. Smyrna continuing, especially in their WIC program, they went up somewhere around 400 for the year in WIC. So they were, and then they saw 10,000, as you can see, in WIC. And we saw 13,000. So it just shows you that there's a real need for that to continue.
Sure.
And that the building we built and all that is being utilized. The state's looking at giving us some extra support staff. You know, we've been talking about we need more staff up there at that end.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will, that's in the works. We'll be seeing that soon, so I'm hopeful for that. Part-time, they'll start out part-time kind of positions, and then as we can show that we're growing, the state will increase those. Gave about 1,500 more immunizations this year than we did the year before. Birth certificates and death certificates, this is an administrative duty that we do as a something nice to offer to the public, so they don't have to go all the way to Nashville or mail something in. We're a site where they can get those, and we did amazing numbers of that. 5,300 birth certificates. That's something like 20 a day. Birth certificates and death certificates. You can see 9,000 of those. So it doesn't mean 9,000 people died or residents of Rutherford County, because you might come and get 3 or 4, you know, for billing purposes and things that you need when you have a loved one that has passed. So, but it does show that there's a lot of administrative stuff that happens while we're trying to also see the clinic patients. So.
Anybody have any questions on November or December's report? We'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve both reports.
Any second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, special projects. You doing that tonight, Ms. Nolan?
Blackman Middle Annex and Smyrna Primary Addition, both of the construction are over 91% complete as of the date of this report. Eagleville Phase 1 is at 26.4% complete. Look on page 2. And one thing that you would be looking at is the column BC, not obligated, and if you see negatives in this number, that should raise your eyebrows. Smyrna Primary is over obligated by $43,000, but I believe that the school board anticipates that being cleared up with their final.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, let's make sure that was right in that. Stewart's Creek High School is closed out, but when we borrowed the money, there was like a rounding in there, and there's about $891 left on our books in that project, and so we're going to be moving that to the new high school project, and you'll just see this number change, but less than $1,000. But that will clean up. Just clean up.
Any questions for Ms. Nolan? We'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any good? All right, school board report. Welcome to all the school board members that are here. We've got almost 100%.
Would you like to begin with a couple of amendments?
Yes,
I think.
that'd be great.
I think I'll let Mr. Sandby, who's going to cover the first 2 amendments, since I'll be speaking to the other.
Our first amendment is an adult ed critical needs grant amendment. And our adult ed program has been awarded a critical needs grant of $69,550 for the rest of this fiscal year. This grant included increasing the hourly pay rate for our part-time adult ed teachers from $21 to $22 an hour. And it's a mix of state and federal money coming to us. Our recommended motion is to approve the general purpose school budget amendment for adult education critical needs grant of $69,550 as presented.
Any questions? Just want to take them both together?
All right? No, it's mixed funds.
Okay, we'll do this, okay.
Motion
Okay.
approved this one.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's
It's
call
Money,
roll
sorry,
on that.
roll call.
We have to remind
I pulled the Jeff Jordan on you, didn't I? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
And our second amendment comes from Fund 177, our capital projects fund. We are asking to take $44,000 from essentially its fund balance, the committed for capital project account, in order to purchase 1 acre of land from John and Judith Turner for $40,000. The Turners will donate 2 acres of land as part of this purchase, and the remaining $4,000 will be used for closing costs. The land will be used for practice fields for Eagleville High School, and the lease on our existing practice fields is being canceled. And since we often run short on closing money, I put money in this time. So hopefully we won't have to do a cleanup amendment later. But the recommended motion is to amend $44,000 from account 34,685, Fund 177, committed for capital projects, in order to fund the purchase of 1 acre of land for the Eagleville practice fields as presented.
Where is this land in relation to the current practice field? Is it part of that field?
It's to the west, it's on Old 99, just to the west of the EMS building. It's adjacent to that building.
This actually integrates into the campus better than the other properties.
Yeah, you can enter it from the campus with a little access road put in.
And there is an understanding this property may not always be used for practice field. It just becomes part of the campus, because at some point in time, we may need to use this 3 acres for something else as that school grows and the community grows out there. So we want to pass that on to the booster club, that they'll get it for the foreseeable future, but it's not theirs to do forever. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Reed and the Turners for them working with us, and Commissioner Reed for twisting their arm a little bit maybe to make this work. You know, well, I was hearing some big numbers that I couldn't support at all before.
I think it most definitely we need to prove the fact that the Turners were very instrumental in providing this property for us. And I want to make the motion to approve this motion
Very good.
this time.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about the 5-year building program again. I think you may have received a copy of it a week or so ago. We have another copy for you tonight if you'd like to look at that.
Thank you for sending that. Appreciate
Give you
that.
a chance to look at it again.
Yeah.
I want to give you tonight some of the background information of what kind of led us to some of these projects and why we're looking at the particular ones that are listed. Of course, the 5-year plan is $234 million. And I'll have to tell you, and most of you know, 3 years out, we're pretty good. When you get to year 4 and 5, we're not nearly as good, because it depends upon how quickly the development of the economy and many other factors that handle that. So when you kind of look at the program out years 4 and 5, it's our best guess and estimate. I was reading the paper this morning. It's kind of shocking when I read, I think it's the Mosburg's 2035 plan. They said the city may need 9 more schools and the county 12. I don't know if any of you read that or not, but that was in the paper. That's how I kind of started part of my day this morning. It's kind of frightening when you start to think of that. But our proposals are based upon several of those factors. Now, we think we've addressed 3 essentials, and I want to kind of quickly show you some of those 3 essentials. The first one will be this sheet that's multicolored. This is some enrollment counts. Was kind of based for the same period last year back to where we had January 22nd. We're having difficulty with our our software that the state has recommended for attendance. It has really been a process of the first year for it. It's going on pretty much all over the state. So if it's anything, it's undercounted a little bit. Ms. Haley was telling me that even for John Coleman. But one of the things that we tried to do is to anticipate some district-wide and some geographic area growth and enrollment. Our growth for the last 10 years for schools has been anywhere from about 1.2%, which would be this year, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and 5.6%. Of course, when you have 41,500 students, anytime you're talking about a couple of a percent, it makes a difference. High priorities for us, certainly for the geographic and the enrollment ones, is the Oakland Middle property and the new middle and elementary school in the Smyrna Laverne area. That's the thing. Number two, kind of in our essentials, is just continue to address the renovation needs and some overcrowded facilities that we have. John Coleman, some of you have visited that and toured that. There's significant needs there for replacement or renovation. You look at the building. Smyrna Laverne High stadiums are certainly crowded. The reason that is there, if you attend games there, the visitor side has to come over underneath the bleachers on the home team side, and I'll just, there are safety issues in mixing. That's where the restrooms are. That's where the concession stands and all are. Certainly, as we built other buildings and time came on, we did a better job in the designing that. But that's certainly an issue. We would like you very much to consider that. You're already addressing the Eagleville and the Blackman, the growth at Eagleville, and we'll look at some of those numbers in just a second. And then we were talking about also the 5-year plan talks about some additions at Roy Waldron, Oakland Middle, Laverne Middle, Siegel High. I guess the third essential thing, and this really kind of is a string on my heart too, that our board is looking at ways. We have 146 portables, and 43 of those are classrooms, and I brought you a sheet to look at that. But this plan has the potential, kind of in those first 3 years, to eliminate 47 portables. That's significant. You look at that, we'll kind of show you how some of that might be. So I'd like to take just a moment with you and please stop me. We'll talk about some questions or anything you'd like. If you'll kind of pull up this sheet, that's kind of the enrollment, if you could look at that. Just want to point out some things. That's the membership. If you look at the column 2015, if anything, it might be undercounted a little bit. I highlighted in that particular column some of them in yellow, and the reason I did is to let you look at the middle schools. Of course, that's where we pick up from middle schools if you're in the Murfreesboro area, or certainly Smyrna, Laverne, or wherever you might be. Our largest middle school right now is Blackman Middle, which you just finished, jumped to 1225 this year, which is up 6.1%. So a good thing we got that one in place, or we'd really been in a mess there, having to move more portables in or something like that. But if you just kind of look down through there, and you can kind of see your numbers. From Oakland Middle, 1,063, and I'll explain something there. Why is Oakland Middle down 3.7%? Is because we rezoned last year. If you go down and take a look at Whitworth Buchanan, you can see Whitworth Buchanan is up 12.9%. So the reason that Oakland is down is because we rezoned students from Oakland Middle to Whitworth Buchanan. So in the numbers and percentages, it shows up that way. But anyway, that's why you see those particular changes. The Rock Springs Middle, 1,059, 4.7. Both Rock Springs schools, elementary and middle, 4.2% increase and 4.7% increase. That's significant when you take a look at that. That's one of where the new property and the new school would help address that. But I'll just let you look at the rest of that column if you want to in 2015. We have a column that says differences growth, but we'll look at the percent change. The ones that I have in red are certainly some of the most critical for us. At 3.8% growth at Cedar Grove, the 2 Rock Springs, and Stewart's Creek, elementary and middle. Both of those, one grew at 5.6%, the elementary and the middle school grew at 7%. And You're well aware that I think Smyrna just approved some of Mr. Floyd's development there for 147 houses. Am I correct? I think they cut it back a little bit. There's another piece of property, about 400 acres down the road from it, that's open for development. So even though we've just opened the Stewart's Creek Middle and High, we're going to be in trouble there. Stewart's Creek High in itself, as we take a look at that, of course we did, if you remember, we did a grandfathering over 2 years to kind of establish that, not overcrowd Stewart's Creek High and hold Laverne and Smyrna High. But you'll see that Stewart's Creek High did grow by 26.9%. But I'm going to tell you, his senior class, because of the grandfathering at the old school, is now 250 students. His freshman sophomore class are well over 500. So that school next year, just from normal growth and the graduation coming out, you're going to look at 200 or 300 there. I mean, they would have the potential to try to be our largest high school if we're not very careful on that one. So you'll see that one next year, I think, certainly top the 2,000 mark. Overall, in some of the 1.2%, like I said, is one of our lowest. Where sometimes, why did that happen, or how does that happen? I'll point out 2 factors for you. Really glad that the city did open their new school at the veteran, because we were last year, when you look at Blackman Elementary, we had 1,103 there last year, and the portables and all with it. And by them opening that school, that certainly helped us. We're kind of now getting kids back in the building and that sort of thing. But that was 226 students. The other students are there. If you look at Brown's Chapel, it did impact Brown's Chapel too. Brown's Chapel lost another 54 students. So as you kind of look at those 2 numbers, you're looking at about 280 students that, had the city not built that school, would have been in Rutherford County, there. So you begin to look at that 504 becomes again closer to 800 in that growth. But again, that certainly did help us in looking at that. The green arrows kind of in the last column. If we do this building plan, this in about 3 years, each of those schools that you see the green arrow by will be impacted directly by the building plan, either from the new school in the Smyrna Laverne, from the additions of John Coleman, replacing much of the John Coleman area. But that kind of lets you see how quickly it can impact it, basically in those 3 years as we get those projects going. Any questions really on the enrollment sheet? I mean, it's still here if you want to reference back, but just kind of lets you kind of see where we are in our schools. Let's look.
I have a question.
Okay, sure.
You've got 6.1%, the Blackman Middle and Roy Waldron, and you didn't have those in red, and 6% seems pretty high. I was just curious why you didn't categorize those as critical.
I could have very easily, but the Roy Waldron, if we will do the Roy Waldron, I think that will address that. At the same time, if you'll look up at Laverne Lake has 921 students. They did lose 28. And I'll tell you what it is. It was the downturn in Lake Forest Estates. A lot of people lost their house and moved out. And thanks to Ms. Cook with the tour we had the other Saturday, I really did learn some things. We're seeing now those houses are being reoccupied. People are moving in. And I think you'll see those enrollments grow all year
We
as
saw
people
very
move back
few.
in.
We saw very few for sale signs,
We did.
and it shows the economy is picking up and those houses are being filled again.
So I think that was kind of the anomaly dip that covered the recession time. I think that's what we're looking at there. But we certainly could have, if we do the Roy Waldron, that is one. It is typically not grown quite as much as some of the others, but it grew this year. For whatever reason, it has grown quite a bit this year. There's some proposal for apartments behind the post office and all. Ms. Cook can talk to that better than I can. So certainly that's an issue for us. But we will still, another proposal in the 5-year plan is to add an addition onto Laverne Middle School. And it's not like the Blackman addition. We're not talking about building an additional gym area and that sort of, but a two-story classroom addition. That's not on the front end of this building program. But hopefully, with the addressing what we have at Roy Waldron, we will be revisiting something at Laverne Lake or something, I don't know. Again, 3 years we're pretty good at, and beyond that we're not.
And McFarland Point has several new houses coming in, and I call it Martinwood. And, you know, they're finishing up that subdivision, so that's gonna affect Cedar Grove and over
It is.
there.
Yes, and we know that very much so. You know, 1 year ago, we didn't have John Coleman on our radar as part of the 5-year plan. And what we found out is that we actually own additional or have access to additional land there without purchasing it. We own over to where the park begins. So with that new information in mind, there's a way we can add the addition, a 2-story addition at John Coleman, not have to close the school while we're building it, and make the replacement. So economically, that whole game changed as we found out we did have access to that additional land. And that's why it's appeared so quickly on this year. It was a game changer for my thinking, and I think for much of our boards in that too.
Those children shouldn't have to go out in the weather like they have to.
I agree.
John Coleman's been the redheaded stepchild for the last 30 years, in my opinion, to some extent.
And high needs children. I mean, honestly, what's your free reduced rate, Ms. Haley? Right,
77%.
about so over 3/4 of your students are free or reduced lunch there. I'll tell you that staff does so much, from businesses in the areas giving them coats and things that they've done this year for those kids. They really embraced them and done what they could for them. So I just laud what they do. But they need it. I mean, I think that's certainly our #1 priority. Let me speak to you just a minute, if I could, about portables, which is kind of the next sheet down.
Well, you see Coleman has 15.
Yeah, 15 portables. So that very quickly can tell you if you do something there, that talk about we might eliminate 47 portables, Mr. Don. That's a third virtually there. Some of you did go on the tour with us. Even the ramps get slick, right, Mayor? He was down there. He was down there with us the day we were touring, a very frosty morning, the carpet and all on there. But the children basically have to come back into the building for restrooms. You know, it's just, unless you just see it or visit it, you really have appreciation for what those teachers are doing and commenting on those. But anyway, 15 portables.
Let me add one thing. Ms. Hill, didn't you say you have second graders that will go to portables
I
and
have
never,
second graders currently out there that will never come back in the building.
that will never come back in the building?
Unless we do something about it.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
They prepared a little sheet that I got when I was down there. 40% of our students are in the main building. 60% of our, I got that just reversed. 40% of our students are in portables, which is a large number.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how they would find their classroom. You know, I mean, when we went out there, it's a maze because of the elevation of the ramps and things like that. They have to have a certain sort of configuration for ADA and whatnot. I had no idea where we were. So.
When you go in both of the buildings, of course, the instructional model certainly has changed in recent years, and that we have a response to intervention now, which the state mandates, but it is the right thing to do. And as Rutherford County schools, a few years ago, our special education population was about 14% or so. We have it down to around a little over 11% now. And my goal is to try to get it around down 9%. And here's what happens. If you're catching the kids early, and if you're doing the interventions for them earlier, you can find a remediation to help these students earlier. It actually saves us money because we don't have to hire as many special ed teachers. You don't have to have that. You can absorb them into the classroom and do that. But on our website, when you call up Rutherford County Schools website, and we'll leave it up there, it came up last Friday, Mr. Trey Duke, who is over our response to intervention, has a video there, it's 4 or 5 minutes long. Click on it, look at it. It kind of explains to parents what is RTI, what's its purpose, what does it do, and that sort of thing. I think in a very quick time you can get a feel for what this can do for the boys and girls that this serve. It's the right thing to do, but going back to what I started, the instructional model has really changed that. In order to do this, when you look at John Coleman, you look at Royal Waldron, they're also high English language learner populations. Rutherford County has about the 3rd largest English language learner population in the state of Tennessee. I've said that before. We're behind Metro Nashville, Davidson County, and Memphis. Around 2,500 that are still ESL. And you test out of ESL in a couple of years, generally, when you look at that, because they get enough English language that they're no longer considered ESL. They're called Transition 1, Transition First Year, Transition 2, that sort of, but the ones that have to have direct service still right around 2,500 of those. So Tennessee is an English-only teaching state for ESL. That's always a question I'm asked, typically from the public. So they receive their instruction in English. We do have EAs and some others that are, we can help us do the communication with parents and with the students, but it's amazing how quickly they learn English when they're given those opportunities. But to do the response to intervention, to work with ESL with those students that are learning our language, you need small group spaces and all to do it. So been talking with Ms. Allen some, and if you would like to go for a meeting next month or sometime, this committee, and go to Royal Waldron, the mayor actually is the one that suggested this, so you can speak to him. If you'd like to go and meet, we'll kind of show you how the model looks, and you'll see all the little spaces. And we walk through on an instruction day, you'll find teachers and students working in the hallways everywhere. You'll be walking around them as they're doing instruction. But one of the amazing things to me is, as we walked around them, the teachers and the students really didn't even look up at us much at all. They kept right on working, which was wonderful, you know, when you look at that. But great people doing a fantastic job. Kids are learning. So, looking at the portables, you can see where the portables are. And there are 2 of them that's with our midpoint. One is a maintenance, you know, at this particular time. But that's kind of for your information. The main thing, the 5-year building plan. We'll take a look at that, if you will. And this is where Miss Lisa Nolan will probably help us, and we'll ask her to take a look at this. This is the plan that you received, I believe. We did have a change in the numbers, certainly for Eagle, thanks to Mr. Reed and the Turners. So that changed that number considerably to do that. But this is our best estimate for the 5-year plan. The second sheet, which is a little bit shorter, Mr. Sandvig basically prepared. And this kind of breaks it down to looking at where are we this year, where are we next year. And there are ways, by the way, that, of course, you don't have to have all the funding up front. So when you're doing your design phase, you're doing your ground preparing all that, your pads and that sort of thing. So many of these buildings, you know, take 2 years or 3 years in funding as we step out to do that. And Ms. Nolan can help us with that. But that kind of tells you what we're looking at. We think we need is something like $57,394,000. But there are additional share monies, of course, with Buffsburg and all, that Ms. Nolan can help you with on that. Questions of me or Mr. Clardy or Mr. Sandy? Board members will be glad to, I'm sure.
I've got one question. For the David Urey renovation, I've been asked about that a couple times. That's, I guess, slated right now, at least on the 5-year plan, not to begin design for another 1.5 years. I know this is fluid. I think Commissioner Jordan even mentioned that sometimes 5-year plans are just what they are on paper, that there's some flexibility. Has there been any discussion about moving that up? Because if memory serves, that was a safety issue as well, correct?
It is, and I was principal there for 22 years.
That's right. So I know it's got a
it's one after my own heart, but I have to kind of sometimes set that aside when I'm trying to find the classrooms.
Right.
And to look at that. But it is, you come in the front door and you enter the cafeteria eating area. They have stationed a person at the front door, and we now have the either the buzz-in system or somebody that meets the person who comes in the front door. But immediately after they come in the front door, they could head down what we used to call the E-hall. They go to the left and go into the classroom, or they're certainly among students. So the design change for that would move the offices and things out front, where the public and people could come in, and you would isolate from general walk-in public unless they had permission to enter that.
Right.
It does need to be done. We would certainly be for moving it up, but again, I know
You have to set priorities.
it really is, when you're having to look at the monies, this wasn't a one, and look at David Ure's portables too. I mean, that's another situation. They got 9 portables. So even at that, they still got 9 outside. The new elementary and middle school that we're looking at with that property will provide some relief there too. So that's one of that green arrow is kind of out there also as we begin to look at that.
The other reason I was bringing that up too was I know on the backside where we drop off my daughter, there's no covered walkway there for special needs students in wheelchairs. And so to see them sitting out there in the rain, not acceptable. And admittedly, I've got a daughter involved in that, but I think everybody in here can probably agree on that that's not going to work. So anything you could do to work that in to consideration, that needs to be done, because we've got several people who've called me about that, both special needs family members and non-special needs family members. Just go to David Ure. That's something that needs to be looked at.
Wasn't aware that there was an issue. We would.
Yeah, it's on the back side. You know where it's where
That's
they
their classroom.
park on the back side. That's the special needs classrooms are down there, and they have no way to get in. So if it rains, their wheelchairs get soaked, and they don't have anybody that walks them in and undercover.
Is the plan for us to vote on the 5-year plan tonight and forward it on the budget?
Was my next question.
Well, I think we have to leave a lot of that to you. We don't normally recommend what you do, but you need to talk with Ms. Nolan there and see what parts and for what year that you'd like to fund. You know, we just need a commitment for something that we can start some of the projects to do, because the drawings and certainly, you know, tonight we do need that property before some development takes it and says we want to use it for something else. The properties that we've located is close to the gas, the water, the sewer. There's enough acreage there that we would like to put an elementary school and a middle school. I can say our parents, community loves the cluster of schools. You know, you've kind of got that at Blackman area. You've got that at the Stewart's Creek area. They like to be able to start the kids and watch them follow through with that. So there's enough property there that we could purchase to get the elementary and the middle together, and it's really the thing to do, I think.
Well, personally, I mean, I know Miss Allen doesn't like what I'm fixing to say, but I can support the whole thing except for the bleachers in Smyrna and Laverne. And I know they're needed, but they're needed 6 or 7 nights a year. I know there are better stadiums at Oakland and Riverdale, but they didn't have a stadium at all for 25 years they were in existence. Smyrna and Laverne have had them from day one. And there it's a little antiquated, but when we've got kids out in the rain and we've got kids in a portable, I'm not going to vote to spend $1.8 million to fix something that is literally a problem 6 or 7 nights a year. Because the soccer games, the other stuff, whoever else plays there, they're not overcrowded. It's only on those varsity football home nights, you know, and for me, I'm not going to vote for that much money when we could put that money into a classroom and get a child inside, you know, so.
I agree with him, and I think John Coleman should be a priority right now from going out there and visiting that school.
Well, and you
about
may be
all bleachers and so forth,
you may be surprised, but I agree with you. I said the same thing to Wayne Blair when it came through. I was like, I'm surprised you left that on there. As much as I would like it as well, you can't put that ahead of classrooms.
No, you got.
just can't.
You need children in a productive learning environment, and athletics is nice and great, and I'm a big fan of football and stuff. But $1.8 million for that many nights a year, I mean, at this point in time, I wouldn't support that at all. You know.
I would like to say that I think, I speak for the school board, that we would like a firm commitment, whether it's through a motion or whatever, to fund this, the majority of it, because we, you know, we have a lot of planning to do, and as the longer this stuff lays around, the more difficult it becomes.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, Mr. Odom said, you read where the 20-year plan showed us needed more than 12 schools.
Exactly.
I would say we built more than 12 schools in the
We
last
have.
20 years.
We actually
And
have.
that snowball is growing, so I would,
know.
just in my limited experience, I would say 12 is a very short number. It'll be much more than that over the next 20 years, unless we start building 4,000 student schools or something, which I don't think we want to do. Sorry, I
Something to
cut
add.
you off.
You indicated at least this portion. What, this, are you
The
referring to?
57, if we
Well,
get
okay.
started on this year's
Okay.
piece.
The blue.
The blue,
Yes.
the next barring.
But as you mentioned, we have that land, we are testing
It's
it now.
geotesting now, the land is in the Smyrna area for that, so we're doing the testing so we could move on it.
If we could get a commitment on this, then it would be Mrs. Nolan's responsibility to follow our schedule and go to the borrowing as needed to make it available for us when those issues came up.
Again, when you say, I think Commissioner Dodd said, when you say this, you mean this back sheet
Basically,
right
the
here?
blue sheet is what we're
Okay.
looking at, which starts, the one that's blue is the
Okay.
one immediately
I
coming
just
down.
wanted-
We kind of stretched it out, but I
This
think
list
Ms.
is
Nolan
maybe
has
the
some,
place
she
you
has
marked
some
up.
ideas how year two.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure when he was saying
Okay.
this, we were all talking about the same
1.8.
thing.
I got
Yeah.
you. And it's referenced here as well.
Yeah, you tell you dropped 1.8 out of that number.
What about Miss Nolan?
I said the mayor's apartment back there.
I want to ask one or two questions. First of all, John Coleman, I think we're all aboard on John Coleman, we want to do that. When we spend $19 million, what part, if any, is going to be retained in the current school building? I never did quite clearly understand that, so could you, Mr. Clardy, tell us exactly sort of what's happening here there?
It will basically be, as you know, there's a newer part there that's a gym.
Right.
And that would possibly be converted to something other because, as you stated, it's not large enough, really, as it is. So we would build a new gym and we'd basically build the entire school, but we would also consider at some point where to tear down the balance of the building or use it for something else. For instance, right now we have hands-on science that is at Walter Hill. If we could get the hands-on science and get it somewhere else, then that would let us free up some space there at Walter Hill.
All right, so what you're building is basically a self-contained school with possibly the exception of the gymnasium and some of that front part
And
of
the
the building.
library.
The
The library
yes,
part.
on the front.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other, you will determine later whether we keep the older part back where the classrooms are, et cetera, for some other purpose. Okay, I
Yes,
just
sir.
want a little bit of, so we could evacuate the whole building almost, you might say, and
Yes.
then you can decide how to use this.
And I was thinking, we were saying it could possibly hold about 900, a little over 900, was that the number we were throwing out?
That's correct. It would be the same square footage as a new elementary school.
All right,
So
so
it's two-story because of the space. we
But
talked about.
as you noticed at Roy Walden particularly, we're going to do some design expertise in this with peer groups particularly to address maybe some smaller areas that petitions could be taken out later if we needed to address those smaller classrooms and the intervention area.
And Mr. Odom sort of mentioned this, but all of us that grew up a century ago or almost, the way education is done today is not even close to what we're all so used to focusing on one classroom, one teacher. It is so far from that now that really it's just amazing how much the model has had to change. So I think it would be wise, he suggested maybe that the principal at Roy Waldron had tremendous presentation on how this works, and it's just astounding if you go through that building and see how many rooms they've had to convert to 2 or 3 rooms to be able to have these small group interventions. So all of this, the whole dynamics and design is changing immensely, so it's hard for us that didn't grow up in that process to truly appreciate the major changes they've had to put forward in the proper instruction of all these special things that they have to address with small groups, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids in room after room after room in Roy Walter. And that's all I want to say on that.
The addition with the library and all that was in the mid-90s. I think we were finishing that, the financial side on that project out in some amendments when I first came here.
Well,
So
the
we
original
just know
building's
that.
what,
Yeah.
1940s to 50s?
Yeah.
When that range was designed, with Seward Air Force Base for and all that at that time. So our people have done a good job of trying to maintain it, but there's just not many restrooms there. How many restrooms inside? Two. If you wanna
For
see
all of John
you don't see the count of students there.
And you know, the commission has really been good because through the capital improvements budget 6 years ago, we went in and replaced floors, we put ceilings in the building, we you know, painted and cleaned the building up. So it's in a lot better shape now than it was, but it's still very inadequate.
There was a fire down there at one point in time, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and some of it got rebuilt. But that's one time, I can't remember exactly. I remember this conversation.
I think Mr. Holliday has something to add.
I just wanted to express the thought came up, how can the school board propose that 1.8 million for the stadiums? And the thinking was in part because of the addition to our board of former Commissioner Jeff Jordan and now school board member and former member of this committee. How many years have we brought that Smyrna Laverne proposal for the stadium to be brought to the standard that exists throughout the county? As many as 6, 7, 8 years we brought that up. In a $230 million proposal, 1.8 million doesn't seem like such a large number. It is a big number. It's not insignificant by any means, but it's necessary and appropriate for reasons of safety and parity. And so as a school board, we have a responsibility to continue to bring that and raise that issue. I also would suggest that there's not a method or a plan for us to take the time after time after time that we return projects under budget. Stewart's Creek High School, tens of thousands of dollars under budget, for us to take that money and repurpose it and accomplish this on our own. We have to bring it through this method and have you help us make the hard decision. We recognize 1.8 million is not a classroom, it's bleachers, but it's necessary. And how many times will we bring it before it's deemed appropriate?
I know the planning department brought a Suburban up in their budget for like 15 years straight, and finally they just gave up. But never got their Suburban.
So we got about 6, 8 more years or something.
They're on spring.
Are you ready to have Ms. Nolan come up and share some thoughts?
Sure, yeah. We'll step back if you like. Or the mayor come up.
I just didn't know how deep y'all wanted to get into this. Y'all can stay. Come and stay. Don't leave me alone. And the only thing that I had to share, and Mr. Odom already alluded to it, I'm going to pass this around. And there's some things that the mayor hadn't seen on this. So, draft. Okay. And I'm just going to walk you through these documents. The first page is kind of mirrored what the school board. I just took their form, put it the way I'm used to looking at the documents. When do we need the school, and when do we think that? This first page is when you want it to open. So the second page is the timing, and when we'll start bringing the monies in. So what I really want to show you on this page is the item highlighted in yellow.
And that is, I've done the calculations on if we were to borrow money now based on the spread of population between the city of Murfreesboro schools and county schools, and how much additional monies that we would have to borrow to share. And for you new commissioners, that is a point, that whenever we do something for schools that K through 6, we have to share a portion of that with city schools.
Is that around 19%?
Yeah, it's less than that. It's about 15.
It used to be a little higher.
Right. It really depends on that split. And we were talking before the meeting. If we borrow in this fiscal year, we use last year's ADA numbers. So the next year we'll use this numbers, but of course we don't know what those are. But we do know that in this current year they increased more than ours, I think.
They potentially may have increased a little more than we did.
So this year might be a
They
little
pulled
higher.
some of our students over to that new school.
Oh,
overall,
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So anyway, what I blended in that, so you can see his $57.4 million number changes to 63.2. Primarily because you've got that elementary school in there, and you're sharing a third on the middle school. Now, I'm prepared if you want if the question is, can we do this without raising taxes, which always seems to be the question. But y'all are all smart enough around this table to know when you add $253 million worth of debt, you would be looking at me and say, what are you doing with all that money? You know, and us not build schools. So I can tell you how that kind of plays in if you are interested. Just got to turn that thing on. Oh, there's the ADA numbers that you asking. It's 1479. That's the number that I used on that ADA split. But this third page is kind of not forgetting us on the county side. It's some of the projects that we've got coming and how that will impact. So, sorry.
Well, if you look at a 5-year plan, the only one that's really in stone is the first year of it.
That's right.
Because a year ago, like you just mentioned, John Coleman wasn't on the plan. Now it's at the top of the plan. So, 2 and 3 years from now, we may be looking at something very different for 17, 18, and 19. It probably won't get cheaper, but it's not in stone.
Now we'll see if the folks up there in the bird's nest is watching my struggle on turning this thing on.
There it goes.
Okay.
Explain the bill.
Didn't know what happened.
Okay. All right, I won't get into the revenue and how all that plays out. I'm just going to start from the beginning. That is our debt, our current debt. So each one of those colors, that's a bond issue. As we add on, and you can see it's a little above 40 million what we're paying in principal and interest currently. I built this using the bottom line number. I'm going to cheat off your sheet. So, again, if we borrowed the additional, I'm at 65.2. That is next fiscal year. And the way I did this is I assumed we're going to borrow toward the end of this fiscal year, which means there'll be principal and interest payment in the next fiscal year. You see that add-on is adding the 65.5 million. There's the next 62.2. Now, of course, I did this encompassing the county projects as well. And if you look at that, the Justice Center, I kind of spread that between 2 years so it's not one huge impact in that first year. So you can see I tried to smooth out the borrowing on those 3 years. And so you just see this, of course, this one is the 2017 at 66.7 million. We're above 50 million in principal and interest payments in that one. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, it's like, well, okay, what about your fund balance, Lisa? How's that going to work out? Okay. This I'm trying to compare. Red is what we got to pay. And this is current. We hadn't borrowed another penny. This is what we owe right now. The blue is revenue, and that is estimating assessments will go up. Very small increases in revenue of what's coming in. It also says that if assessments go up, we're going to still have the same amount of pennies that go in. We haven't done that yet, but that's what this is assuming. Okay, so you can see how the blue line looks really great. And as Mr. Odom said, really, you go out much more than 5 years, this data is worthless. What color is that? Chartreuse green. That is an estimated fund balance. What we think that fund balance should be, and that's based about 65% of what our payments would be. So you can see that the green line follows right along with the red line, 65% of what we pay out. So what we're saying to the people who lend us money, all our citizens that lend us money for all these projects, is we're going to try to make sure that we have enough money. Catastrophe happens, we can pay you. Okay. Now this little short black line, that's my fund balance. Our fund balance. I'm very our fund. Okay. So you can see, wow, look, this happens the next 5 years. We are right in the debt service.
If we quit borrowing money.
We don't borrow any money. We don't borrow any money. We are golden. All right, so this next one, what happens in that next year if we borrow the 61.2 million? I think I might change that. It's supposed to be 65.2. I think it's good. 15, 16. We were budgeting for that. We are okay. Look at the, looks like our fund balance and what our projection should be. Looks like it's going to be okay, but it's that next year, 16, 17, that might cause us some problems. Of course, in 16, 17, we might be borrowing again. Let's go that one. Okay, got a problem there, because now that's the additional 17, 60 some. Yeah, 62 coming on. So all I'm demonstrating is no, we cannot, with the existing pennies that we have in debt service, not do something to address it.
How many times have you said that? Every year?
Every year have I said that we cannot do it? No. Well, it all depends on when we're looking at projects,
The thing about it is, this is a list of needs,
Right.
not a list of wants.
Right.
There's no gray area stuff here, that teaching children, applying, having a classroom space is a need. If we were talking about building greenways or swimming pools or recreational facilities or something else, but you've got to educate children.
And the kids are here. The kids are here.
And more
of course, I don't want to talk too much, but it's, to me, if you've got a need, you got to take care of it, and you got to address it.
Well, it's separate from this presentation, Lisa, but I think it's always good to remind people, Mr. Odom, we had talked about it, and I think it had been brought up by the school board, that we face fines if we have overcrowding in certain classrooms, correct? Do you remember what those numbers are based on classroom size?
50,000, 62,500, and 75,000.
For each classroom,
Per
right?
class.
Yeah.
And that's each week or each day or each month?
A year.
A year. And
And
so people need to know that too, that if we don't build, then we're paying a little bit too on the back end in fines. But on top of that, it's what Commissioner, we're here to educate the children as well and help provide that kind of quality education that we have now in Rutherford County. And it's a challenge to do that when you've got 45 kids in one room with one teacher, no EAs. It just doesn't, they lose that value, and then, it affects county numbers and children's education, so.
Now, Lisa, this is more than funding the money needed this year. This is funding the long range.
Judicial.
This is funding the whole 200 plus.
No, ma'am.
This
No,
is just the
no, ma'am.
57?
That one looks like,
You're just 2 years in at that
yeah,
point.
there's that.
There's that.
Okay.
Which then that shows you that the amount of debt that's coming on far exceeds
Right.
what the revenue is. So we've got to, I mean, you know, fund balance is out the window.
Right.
We'll have to address those issues.
Go back to the previous slide, which is just for the first 2 years you're talking about borrowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in 15 and 16, the fund balance is about equal to the required amount of money that.
That's the 216, we know that plain one, and this is 2. Okay, yeah, that's this 2016.
Yeah, 16, 17.
2016.
16, 17, how many pennies do we need in 16 and 17, roughly? To cover, you only,
I didn't pull that. I mean,
but it's about a difference of 30 million versus $10 million we need.
okay, and we're about 600,000.
So 600,000 plus.
18 cents.
So we need 16 cents to take care of, to maintain our required fund balance in 16 and 17, that fiscal years, which is just 2 years out.
Of course, you could have tax-based growth.
You could have tax
You know,
We could have some of that, yes.
Yeah, which would
We either
lower
gotta grow that much
the-
or we gotta add that much. Here, this is yours.
No, I couldn't remember what a penny was.
And the estimated
It's
revenue,
almost 700,000.
the estimated revenue, does it have some assumptions about
Oh, you want to know? Yes.
growth? Just
Oh,
right there
yeah,
on that
yeah, yeah.
slide. What-
Yeah, yeah, I'll tell you what those are. Let me get down to them. All right, here begins the assumptions. This shows you, let me see if I can do it. Yeah, see right there? This is it's giving you your past history on how the value of the penny is worth, which is a basis of the assessed value of the properties in our community. So you can see back in these years, it was really blowing and going. You can see it was not going very well in these years. Okay, so I think with this reappraisal, look at this reappraisal, we're at 3.6% increase in our assessed value. But look at the last 4. Look how much it grew those years. Okay, so that's, I kind of keep in mind, and yes. Yep. Okay, so here's the assumptions. A penny, I've got 615,000 is what it is current year. This is factoring a 2% growth factor. So I changed this to 5 and 6. That revenue's coming, I mean, but what is it? What will it be? 2% is conservative, okay? So you do know that I've got some conservative parts in this. But the problem would be in 18, 19 forward, the reappraisals. This thing assumes that you'll keep the same amount of pennies that are in there, but in a reappraisal year, everybody wants to roll
Certified
back.
rate, yeah.
So if you roll back, then that takes off any kind of growth, our dollars, because this is assuming the penny's going to grow and we'll keep the same amount of pennies in there. Okay.
Of course, government accounting, you've got to count on the least amount of revenue and the most amount of expense. So it's worst case scenario.
Right. Okay, so, and then our development tax, you can see, well, I've got a very small, I mean, this is 1/2 of the development tax, because the other half goes into the general fund to fund capital projects. The other,
750.
it's split. So this goes to fund all our debt, a lot of our debt. Interest earnings, economy changes, they earn 5-6%, whenever that may happen. This is factoring at 1. It is also, this is a conservative number, because when those monies come in that we borrow, it'll be sitting there, we'll earn a little bit, but right now it's not a lot. Rentals, the money that comes in here is, that's pretty stagnant. That is the monies that we get from USDA renting the facility over at Lane Park. It has since we did it. It's been coming to this fund, I kept it here. This airport authority, if you remember, we did a debt issue for them that they are paying us back. So that what we owe to pay the bonds is in the slides that show what our existing debt, but this also shows their revenue coming in to pay for it. This other revenue, that is like last year's revenue coming into the trustee for property tax. It's also monies that come in for chancery, properties that go over there, and that's collected, spread on the same value as the penny, however you distribute the penny, that's how those revenues are distributed as well. Business tax goes in there, so those are those type of expenses. That's in that other, again, a small 1% growth. There's not huge swings on that. So there's your assumptions.
Conservative?
Mm-hmm. Conservative, but you know, I always think that this part right there is not the conservative part, where I'm assuming you're going to keep the value of the pennies in there in a reappraisal and don't reduce it.
I don't think you should make any decisions assuming that the numbers are going to be better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in the short end, in the short period, you know, that's the first one. If we were,
That's
and
50, that's 65.
yes, that's assuming we're going to be able to borrow that. And two, in doing this, it was like, okay, we're going to borrow it all this year. We may, you know, at this point, if y'all approve this project going forward, I'd probably be bringing you an interfund borrowing that we would borrow from the balances that we have in it. So the 65% that we have in fund balance, well, we sometimes borrow that money as a short-term financing, and then closer to, then we'll go to the market, pay ourselves back. So we want funding at least committed when the school board, I don't like to have the money in hand when they go and sign the contracts that say, Mr. Construction Man, here's your contract. I'm sure they would like to know that we had the money in place too.
They bid higher if they're not sure.
Yeah.
That's when you do the bid.
And what I was talking about before, we did an internal borrowing for the Blackman Middle and the Smyrna Primary, and we just recently, this last issue, took that out. Kind of bought us a little bit of time.
I have a thought. I hesitate to even suggest it to the school board. But anyway, on these stadiums, when we have a building that we have money left over from, could we take that money and put onto the stadiums instead of putting it into land or something else? You know,
That's what you were talking about earlier in the presentation, one of it.
That has been the way we have gotten other projects started. It all comes down to when do you want to go to the debt markets.
that has been when we're supposed to make everything equal gender, you know, that's come out for us to have the ball fields the same and so forth. And I know we keep putting it off, and it's just a thought, just off the top of my head, so to speak, take that money and put onto stadiums and so forth.
It would, it's always
don't
hard
have
to
millions
judge.
left.
No, we don't have millions left, and it's a few 100,000. But if we'd be asking for money to be borrowed for something else, and while that builds up, but I'm sure we would be open to doing that if
It's just a
we got some
thought.
direction.
Don't
Look
charge
at
it
that on
more.
a case-by-case basis as it comes along.
Yeah.
But you
But
wanna make
if
sure
we
it's household
committed
money.
to trying to save 1.8 million on these 2 years,
I would hope you'd be committed to saving all you could regardless of the
Will
state.
we?
You know,
We will
let's
be.
not tie it to, let's just, with the taxpayer dollars, I think you're saving all you can.
Well,
and,
we will be, so I anticipate some will be left over that we could fund that with,
Well,
is what I'm saying.
We also have to watch our mix.
Right, a mix, as long as it's a high school,
Yeah.
saving.
Did you have something to add?
I just want them, I think, I've already asked them this question, I'm pretty sure they've already confirmed this. There is no place in the, let's say, the Smyrna neighborhood that another middle school annex is even practical or doable. I believe that's, you've already reviewed that multiple times, but is that correct?
The Rock Springs, you know, where it's kind of taken out of that bluff behind it, that's their baseball field. There's just not anything there hardly at all to do. The Stewart's Creek complex, basically with the elementary and middle, is pretty much full. We have the detention pond at the back and put the 3 there. So you really don't have much there. And you know where Smyrna Middle is, that's right there on top of it. So we just, there's really not a good place to do that addition in the Smyrna area right now. Now there'll be some room at the new one. I mean, when we design that and do the layout there, that you could build it for your 1,000 or so and have room to add on to go to the 1,300 or whatnot.
That'll be designed in to the
Yeah.
initial.
Or this funding here.
Well, we usually design it and stub it off. We call it, the architect will do that for us and all. So that's what we try to build into it now as we see it coming.
So Rhonda, just help me understand our obligation. Where do we go with this? We just simply recommend it move to budget or?
Right, if we approve it, then it advances to finance. And then they have to scrub it some more and debate it. And once it clears that hurdle, then it goes to the full commission. So, Lisa, if I heard you correctly, on this scenario, at what point, is it this year you're looking at a roughly 16-cent increase? Is it next year? I mean,
That was 2 years out.
2 years out.
The
yeah,
first
okay.
year, it's almost doable because you have no other basic borrowing except for schools. The next year is when we're gonna have to have money for the judicial building, and then next year after that. If there were no other projects except school projects, you probably could limp along here, just like we're doing just now. But at some point, if we're gonna do these projects, I mean, the judicial building, it's sort of like that Suburban. It's 15 years in the discussion phase.
Great. Any thoughts, any questions?
I think this ought to be moved forward. I'm not gonna make the motion, because I also have to see it in budget, but I just hope it doesn't derail the judicial building. That's been my concern the whole time. Most everybody said they'd rather vote for classrooms and courtroom, but we're pretty far in the judicial building. We've been needing it for decades. It's got to be done.
Great.
So I just hope we can have the fortitude to be able to do it all at once. It's not gonna be, it may not be pretty.
We're talking roughly $55,594,000.
That's what I've got.
Without
Lisa
that.
got the 1.8.
With the share, with the borrow, it's like 64.
Right, with 64.
But I guess for them, in the motion, would be what you're giving them
Right.
and approving for them.
Yeah, not the 5-year plan. I mean, if we're just approving that.
We're just,
Right,
we're
and,
just doing.
and I just
right.
tell you about the Smyrna share, just to keep it in your head, that when we borrow it, we'll be borrowing more than what you're saying you're giving them for their project,
Because of the share.
because of the
Right.
sharing.
So I'll make a motion that we move forward with the 57 million, well, really 55,594,000, I guess.
Everything
Because you
without
took
the
off the
stadiums.
1.8.
Everything without the stadiums.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Very good. Any questions, discussion?
Yes, I'm a little reluctant about pulling the improvements to the stadium in Laverne and Smyrna. If we don't pull it here, how thorough or how in depth will the next drill down into this budget be? Ours has been a really high level. Will it become any more in depth as it moves forward, or as the more in depth conversation take place at your board, the school board?
Now, they've already made their recommendation. This is their
Okay.
recommendation.
We're not holding back anything that
Okay.
we're not aware of.
But they've got more information than us, because they're in the
Yes,
education business.
correct.
But they don't set the tax rate.
Yeah. And if we move forward with including the 1.8 million, it goes to budget.
Budget has that same conversation we're having. If they want to pull that, they have that conversation as well in that meeting. I think a big reason why I would rather us do it, quite frankly, Commissioner Dodd, I think it's our responsibility to pull it before it gets to them in good faith that we understand you already have a tough enough challenge as it is trying to figure out how to help fund this.
Yeah.
The majority of us, if that's the will of the committee, agree that this isn't a higher priority than classrooms. We're not going to make you have to make that decision too, and then us be able to say, well, we tried to pass everything, but that doggone budget committee said no to stadium seating. So that, and I hear where you're coming from. I just think it's my responsibility, speaking only for me, to pull that out now and tell them, here's what I do support. We yank this out because I don't support that on the front end either.
And the reason I made the recommendation is because many of us already had said that we would not fund the stadium seating.
Right.
So I felt there wasn't any reason to make a recommendation there.
Of course, if the support for the stadium is there, it could even be added back at the commission level, at the very last minute.
Yes.
You know, so if there are 11 commissioners in the big room that want the stadium, we can add it back then. I will say as a member of the budget committee that we really don't like for somebody to kick the can down the road.
Right.
And let's let them make the tough decisions. Let them be the bad guy, you know, and stuff. So, and that has happened a lot. You know, that's exactly where Brad was saying more or less. But we really appreciate it when we all work cohesively instead of dropping it on the next committee down the line to actually make the tough call. You know, because I would love to give those students down there better bleachers and all. You know, but you know, I would love even more to get kids out of the cold and the rain.
We take the stadiums out of be 55 to 55.5, wouldn't it?
Right.
But I think that was the motion Commissioner Nipper made.
It
Was,
is.
okay, that's why I just want to make sure that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I think Pat is second. Made that second. That motion.
Are we ready to vote?
Forward the request to the budget committee at $55,594,000, taking out the stadiums.
Question.
Oh, question?
No, I just want clarification. That you're just doing the first year, the 57. I think you've got to consider that next year too. Just my view, because in this blue, you're putting money in for like a middle school and John Coleman, but the pink is the next year that's going to, you know, the next year that does the furniture and equipment in the middle, you know, design site. If the next school that you've already borrowed for, I think that, to me it looks like they kind of go hand in hand, unless you take out the Oakland Middle Annex. I don't want to.
Well, right now we're buying the land, Oakland Middle Annex land.
Yes.
This year.
Yes.
So we can argue next year about if we're ready to pull the trigger
on that.
on construction or
But
not.
What you need is the John Coleman 800,000 and the 341,000 for Maury Waldron.
to make that
And
project
you need,
whole.
if you build a middle school, you need the $5 million there. You need those three pieces that are committed in the first year will have to be followed up to open
And the
it.
site development for the elementary. Yep.
So you need roughly another $6.3 million to be sure you can get those open after you've constructed them.
which would not be borrowed
Wouldn't be
at
borrowed
this
yet.
point.
Right. But I think that's what they were trying to demonstrate with the second sheet. I'm putting words in your mouth.
But every
That they
year,
kind
there's
of
projects
know.
that start and roll into the next year. I remember a lot of times we've done the next year out, you know, and then, of course, it's just common sense will tell you if you build a school, you've got to buy some desks and furniture and fixtures.
We're wanting to be very clear to y'all that we are expecting you to buy those things, not.
And I'm just thinking how the resolution
Yes,
is
yeah.
that you are approving X amount of dollars to fund this.
Right, that's what we're doing.
Would this committee be comfortable funding, saying to fund those projects and let Mr. Sandvik iron out those numbers and bring them to budget? With a rough understanding of what that's gonna add, but, you know, we do need to have lock and key, as a past commissioner used to say.
So are we amending the motion?
I'm not sure what to amend it.
Leave your motion like it is, but give, add to it that you will bring forward some detailed information about the furniture, fixtures, equipment, and other things required to open the school after construction is completed at the next budget meeting to be added to the 55 million, whatever you came up with.
You know how to write that down? Okay.
That was part of your motion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I heard you say it, yeah.
I heard it said, doesn't it?
Read it back for us.
Couldn't have said it better.
Forward the request to the budget committee at $55,594,000, taking out the stadiums. And the school board will bring forward detailed information on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment required to open the school, the funding for furniture, fixture, and equipment to open the schools.
They'll bring that to budget.
They'll bring that forward to the budget.
Okay.
Detailed info.
You did good. Everybody understand the motion? Questions? You ready to vote?
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes. I just have to commend you on an excellent job. This is not an easy thing to understand, much less explain to other people. So I just really have to commend you for the work that you've done and putting this together for us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, to speak to your constituents, you need to know about the portables, you need to know about the growth, you need to know about the numbers there. We do the same thing with the board. I mean, you're elected, you have to be able to explain it. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Yes, thank you.
Can you get some information back to me about David Drury?
I will.
Thank you.
I'll call you.
That works. I'll answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other new business? There's nothing else for this meeting. We stand adjourned.